The Detroit Pistons are in an intriguing situation this offseason as much as anything. They have realistically like $75 million in cap space that they can spend, which is a wild, wild number to be able to get up to. And honestly, I don't know if they're going to be able to spend $75 million competently this offseason, which is a worry for me. They have a few objectives here that I think that they have to get to, right? The first one is you have to extend Cade Cunningham. To me, that is just the number one assignment here. I think this is just like very clearly a max situation. I can't imagine him asking for anything less than the max. And I think the Pistons are just frankly going to have to give it to him, right? Especially given the way he's played. Basically, since the All-Star break, right? He's been absolutely monstrous. If you take away his last game where he went, or last two games here where he played Miami twice and it was like kind of a mess. He'd been averaging 23 points, 8 assists, 5 rebounds, 2.9 turnovers per game, shooting 47, 40, 91 over his last 15 games. Just an absurd little run that he's had. In total this season, 22 points, 4.3 rebounds, 7.6 assists, 45% from the field, 35% from three, 86.5% from the line. I mean, look, like the true shooting percentage is still like 6% below league average, which is not ideal by any stretch of the imagination. In part, I think it's just because he is such a mid-range heavy player, but end of the day, I think you just have to get to the point where you max him and you hope it works, because everything that the Pistons have built toward at this point is centered around Cade. And if it doesn't work, your organization is set back for 5 years anyway. This is a different conversation than the one like with Jalen Green with the Rockets. Like they have 3 other guys ahead of him, in the pecking order right now as prospects, in my opinion. The Pistons don't have anything resembling that with Cade Cunningham, and Cade's a better player than Jalen as well. All due respect to how Jalen Green is playing right now. End of the day, I think you just got to max him and go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any question. Like at the end of the day, in my opinion, this organization is kind of hitched to 2 people. I think it's Cade Cunningham. And based on the contract they gave Monty Williams, I think they're probably hitched to Monty Williams for a little while. I know you can get out from under a coach's contract. Like I get it. It's not a salary cap thing. It's just a money thing for the owner and all of that. This is just my perspective, is that they are number one for sure, Cade Cunningham. We'll talk about some of the other young players, and then I think Monty Williams is probably as well. And listen, the thing is, people may not want to believe in Cade Cunningham. That's fine. They have to, or they might as well sell off everything and just completely restart. And I don't think there's any way anybody has the appetite for that. So I think you go with Cade Cunningham. I think he's shown enough in flashes. He's shown improvement with the 3-point shot. I think the biggest area of growth for Cade is actually at the rim. I think another offseason of adding strength and weight is going to allow him to be more efficient at the rim. We have seen improvement with the 3-point shot. The finishing at the rim, I think, is the biggest step from this season to next season.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that what Cade has showcased in terms of that finishing ability, a lot of it is like stopping short of the rim. It feels like, and getting into that like little floater game and trying to make those like little leaning shots and using his length to kind of go over the top that way. It's got to be like getting more physical, getting into like length extension stuff and being able to score that way. I think like that's where he's got to make the leap to me. I think you're dead on just in terms of strength. And look, like this is a guy that has not had a crazy number of, high level off seasons at this point,
Sure.
right? Like he really just kind of needs an off season to be able to go and hopefully get to a place where they're in a, better position continuing to build around him, because they need more talent around him.
Yeah, and he also has to work like, how do I draw fouls in this league? Like, how do I use what I'm good at to get myself to the free throw line? And again, I think his efficiency, the questions are understandable, Sam. They absolutely are. but I don't think it's that far off. Again, I think the 3-point shot, I think has to do with strength in his legs because when he misses short. You can almost watch the ball come out of his hands, and I can tell you whether he's going to make it or not based off how it comes out. It's either going to be short or he's going to make it most of the time. So he's figured that out to an extent. He gets to the rim and finishes a little bit better. He learns to manipulate defenders to draw fouls and get to the free throw line. And all of a sudden, you have a player that looks the part of what everybody thought when the Pistons drafted him. And as you build the roster around him, there's more energy left for defense and some of those other intangible things. The one thing I'll say about Cade is all of those intangibles have shown through. He took a really bad shot the other night that I don't call Cade out very often, but like I highlighted it and brought it up and tweeted about it. He took full responsibility for it. He didn't hide from it, anything. I've always loved and appreciated that about Cade Cunningham.
Yeah, it just seems like a real dude that, wants to be able to take accountability for everything within the organization. He wants to be a leader. It's been how he is since he's been younger, to be honest with you. He's been that same way. In terms of the long-term core pieces around him, Jaden Ivey, to me, do you have thoughts on Jaden Ivey's season?
Yeah. I mean, I want to hear what you think. Over at the Pistons Pulse, I talk every episode about Jaden Ivey and how good of a player I think he is, and I've been bullish on them working together. I have quickly become the minority in thinking this thing can work. I would guess if you polled Pistons fans, Jaden Ivey would be the name on this list that gets traded.
Yeah, I think that's wild. I would continue to grow around the Cade and Jaden backcourt, but like my issue continues to be like, is Monty Williams going to let Jaden kind of go a little bit? Because
I don't think
Jaden's
so.
a guy where he needs confidence and he needs to be able to go. Like, so if Monty Williams is not going to be moved on at any point in the next 2 years, let's say after this one, because the money is too substantial to be able to do so. Look, as much as I think Jaden Ivey is awesome, and I think Jaden Ivey is worth like trading a top 5 or 6 pick for in this upcoming 2024 NBA draft. It's even given the contract control that you would have over him, you'd still only have him for 2 years and 18 million as opposed to 4 years and 40 million or whatever for top 5 picks. I still would probably do something like that for Jaden. I think his upside is better than anybody in this upcoming draft, point blank.
Yeah, I'm very bullish on Jaden Ivey. I think it can work. I think he's willing to play off the ball. I don't think he has to be a knockdown 3-point shooter for it to work. I think you put other guys that make sense around them, and then just the complete unwillingness to stagger them. And I understand people say, "Oh, your two best players have to be able to play together." I get it, but they can also be staggered and play like that still works. That's part of the process. Cade doesn't play 48 minutes a night. So it makes sense for your second best player to be able to do that. And not that these guys aren't anywhere close, but we just talked about it with Jalen Williams. I'm very much in the minority is what I've realized. Like, I think Jaden's shown growth defensively, winning on the margins. He's figured out how to be a good offensive rebounder, those type of, he does have to make shots, Sam. He has to be able to knock down catch and shoot jumpers. He has to be able to do some of those things. The finishing has regressed a little bit throughout the year. I still feel like he's really good. My personal opinion, I am not a reporter. I do not have sources. I have no insights. My personal opinion is Monty Williams is not a fan, and I would not be shocked to see him be the one that is traded of those 3 names below Cade Cunningham.
Hot take. I would absolutely trade Jalen Duren before Jaden Ivey. I don't know about you. I have not been like wildly impressed with Jalen Duren this year. I feel like Pistons fans get super excited and like really love Jalen, but I feel like honestly, I don't want to say he's regressed across the board, but like I feel like he's making fewer and fewer interesting passes, which is one of the things that like
that is
really
true. That's
intrigues
definitely true.
people about Duren is like the ability to make passing reads and be able to short roll and kick out and things like that. I don't think the defense has gotten better. Do you?
It has not.
Yeah, I think that honestly, like it's just continuing to stay the same.
The same. I would agree.
He's still just like powerful and is a great rebounder and is physical. And like, I respect all of those pieces of his game, but like, if this is who he is, and look, he's still 20 years old, like he's still incredibly young. There's still a lot of time, but like, there isn't like a trajectory there. You know what I mean? There's not a, There's not a move upward. It feels like with Cade, like you saw like him getting better and better and better. Uh, I haven't seen that with Duran yet,
The
which is
the
disappointing, I
the
guess.
one aspect of his game that is improved, and I have no idea how this translates to the aspects of his game we need to see improve, notably the defense, is he has really developed some nice footwork with his finishes. He'll catch in the lane, he'll do this reverse pivot. Like he has some
Fair
really
point.
nice stuff with that. Um, the passing has not grown. Like I was super high on Jalen Duren. Like, don't get me wrong here. This might end up being a miss for me in terms of what I thought his ceiling could be. He hasn't really shown what I thought may be capable of in terms of that passing and some of those type of things. He puts up crazy numbers. He does. He'll play finish. He'll rebound the ball, but the defensive anchor thing is a real worry. And I think what it comes down to with these four guys, and really the three guys other than Cade, is how do you think you should build out a team? How do you think you should build out a winning team in the NBA around Cade Cunningham? Do you need that? The Ivy? Do you need this guy in Jalen Duren? Can Jalen Duren be successful if he's not a rim protector? And then we'll talk about Asar Thompson, who can't space the floor right now, but is pretty good defensively. Is that the most valuable piece? Like, there's people who very strongly feel that Asar Thompson is the one that should stay. Like, maybe you should just trade Ivy and Duren for whatever you can get and build around, Cade and Asar.
So I think where I'm at on this is like I wouldn't move any of these guys this offseason. Just like kind of point blank, I would keep all four of them and kind of go into next season having to figure out what they are. I would love to get an offseason worth of growth basically from them, trying to figure out like, hey, can we be who we want to be with these players, right? I want to see an offseason of growth from all of them before I make a decision. Honestly, I wasn't really going to talk much about Asar. He's the one that has 3 years left. Like he's got all the time in the world. Like they're going to figure out what to do with him, I think. Isaiah Stewart is locked in 4 years, 60 million. The decision that they have to make this summer, there are two of them that I think are like important, are Quentin Grimes and Simone Fontecchio. Quentin Grimes would be an extension. He's only played 6 games with the Pistons so far. I mean, like, unless it's like a reasonable, like cheap number, I think you probably just have to let this go to restricted free agency, right?
Match, yeah, and probably match. I mean, on the positive for the Pistons, he hasn't scored the ball well at all. Like he can't make a shot whenever he has played. So it hasn't
Yeah.
been great. The one that's a little more like Simone has been awesome, like absolutely
Awesome.
awesome, way better than I even thought. Been able to attack off the bounce a little bit, done some things defensively. I do want to make a quick note on Asar Thompson, just like from a health perspective, like shout out him that he's okay. He had this weird thing where he went out in the Mavs game when you could tell he just like couldn't catch his breath and it was like asthma. Ended up being a blood clot. I don't know all the specifics about it. I know that sounds really scary and really dangerous. By all accounts, he's okay, but he is shut down for the season. So just like wanted to send the best to Asar Thompson dealing with that. And for what it's worth, Isaiah Stewart also is done for the year with a hamstring.
So the next kind of question here for us as we kind of talk through this is, what do you pay Simone Fontecchio?
That's the question. I don't know what the market is going to be for him. Like, can you get him back on the essentially, like I would want it to be somewhere in the 10 to 12, 13, like the non-tax
Yeah.
MLE. Like that's where I would want. I feel like that's
I mean,
reasonable and realistic.
Simone right now is averaging 15 points per game on 48, 43, 85 for the Pistons, has been fantastic. And he was great for Utah this season. He was absolutely amazing, I thought, and really helped them be a real play-in contender for a minute there. I think losing him was really, really important and probably just as important as losing Kelly Olynyk, to be honest with you, if you're the Utah Jazz. So in terms of what they should do with Simone, I think you have to retain him. He's like fairly useful on defense. He's not like a great defender or anything, but he's like useful
He's net
on that end.
neutral with like what he does off the ball, communicates, plays hard, and his size.
That's it. I think that like, I mean, like, here's the question. Like, if it gets to like 15 million, do you just have to bite the bullet and do it? Like 3 years, 45, like that's not impossible that they try and squeeze them. My guess is that that doesn't happen because he's restricted and not unrestricted. If he was unrestricted, I think it'd be a significant problem.
Yeah.
But them holding his rights, I think there's a chance that like this probably does not get above the mid level, would be my
Well,
guess.
the other thing is they have all this cap space you're talking about. Like they can probably afford what's scary is you don't want to go too many years. If it's not too many years, and Fontecchio is a little bit older than what people probably realize because of how long it took him to get over here. So
Yeah.
as long as you don't extend the years too far, because eventually this team could get expensive, either with these guys getting off their rookie deals or you trade them for a real star, whatever ends up happening. And so you want to keep some flexibility into the future. That's why, like the Isaiah Stewart deal, it's probably too much now, but there is a team option on the end of that they could get out from under. So with Simone, you have so much cap space this offseason. Like, I don't think you can, like, it's not going to hinder you crazy as long as it's not too many years.
The other big thing with Simone is that he has a $3.8 million cap hold. So there's going to be a real overage there where they can wait to sign him until the end and use that 75 million or 73,
Yeah.
whatever it is in
After
cap
they're over the
space
cap.
after they're over the cap by using their, I believe they have full bird rights on him. They might only have early bird rights on him now that I think about it. But regardless, like I think that they should be able to use those to be able to retain him. Even if they can't, they have the space to do so.
Real quick on Quentin Grimes, like it would be pretty disappointing if he left or doesn't at least start making shots just because of there was nothing that really came back in that trade. You know what I mean? So like you now Bogey and Burks haven't been great since they went to New York. So I think maybe as Pistons fans and people that cover the team, like even myself, I think I probably overvalued where those guys were at in their careers because they just look good on this Pistons roster. But it would be really frustrating to like Grimes walk this offseason and essentially you got nothing in that trade.
Yep. So with Simone, the Pistons should be able to get up to like, I believe it's like 13 million using his early bird rights, like something in that ballpark in order to retain him. Okay, like here's our last question here. Like you see this roster, you have 75 million. What are you using the 75 million on?
I think it's got to be a trade because I don't think there's a free agent. Like I know you put Tobias Harris there. Like that's not necessarily what I want to do. If it is Tobias Harris, I want it to be that 1 year, like then you're out the next
Balloon
year.
payment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
balloon payment. As good friend Keith Smith says, you can't overpay for 1 year when you're a rebuilding team. Like they just
Yep.
if everything else falls through and you have to pay Tobias Harris, then do it. Like I don't love it. I think that's not a successful offseason, but you have to get better. Somebody brought up like what the Rockets did. You have to put some quality vets on this roster. You have to go win some games next year. We're entering 4th year of Cade Cunningham, 3rd year of Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren. As young as Duren is, you have to put real basketball players on the floor. You can't just draft somebody at 2 or 3 or wherever they end up, somebody in the 50s in the 2nd round and take on sin contracts again. I think it's a trade. They have some future picks now they could use if they really want to go all in. I know that's super scary, but they're already at a negative with capital. But yeah, I think it ends up being a trade. I don't know what that trade is. I don't know what the name is.
Yeah. I have a couple of names that I wonder about in terms of free agency. I haven't thought a crazy amount about necessarily trades with the Pistons yet. A name that I'm wondering for them is like, do you go and get like somebody like Malik Monk,
A
like somebody like
thousand,
that?
I would be so happy. I love Malik Monk, but
Yeah, Malik Monk has been fantastic this year. He is a free agent. They would be able to pay him just like very real money, obviously, in order to go get him. Uh, to me, like they need just somebody who can go get a bucket like out of structure in some way. Like Cade is somebody that does need to be able to play within structure a little bit. Monk this year is averaging 16 points, 5 assists, shooting 45, 37, 82. I will say, if you do go get Monk, like I wonder about Jaden Ivey's future there, and maybe that is a situation where you look into a trade. But somebody like that makes a ton of sense to me. I mean,
I
another
mean,
guy
if
that like
I was gonna say, if
Go ahead.
Monk is willing to come off the bench because you paid him so much with the understanding that he still will, that bench unit, or what I want the bench unit to be, could use somebody like that. Like, you put him on the bench with Quentin Grimes, with I still like Isaiah Stewart is a bench big to me. Like, I think that's where his real value comes from. Maybe even Asar until he really fills out his floor spacing, plays as like a bench four, and you're rattling off a staggered Jaden Ivey with Monk, Grimes, Asar, something like that. I mean, that, or maybe it's Fontecchio instead of Asar, whatever it is. I think that is what would be interesting to me.
Yeah, look, I don't disagree with you. I just think that if you're paying Malik Monk the money, you're probably going to have to
Sure.
start at the end of
Yeah,
the day.
that's fair.
The big forward spot is something they still need, though. Like,
Oh
they
my
still need
gosh.
an answer there. And I don't know if there's a guy that exists. Like, I'm assuming Pascal Siakam is off the board. I'm assuming that OG Anunoby is off the board here. I want nothing to do with Miles Bridges if I'm Detroit. Like, I can't imagine that like bringing him home is like a particularly good idea for them. Also, just like generally, the Miles Bridges experience is something I want nothing to do with. A name I put here is Pat Williams. I wonder what the Bulls are going to do with Pat Williams. He's a restricted free agent, obviously. They have to find a way to spend the money somehow. And they're a team that, because they have so much money, I wonder if they care less about tying their money up for a day or two in restricted free agency, because it doesn't necessarily impact all of their plans. Pat Williams fits on an age timeline perspective. He is out for the season. He just had foot surgery, right? Like, averaged 10 points per game this season, shot 39% from three again. Big physical body, doesn't really rebound, but like has some real potential on defense. I can see this being a Troy Weaver guy, is kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that for sure. They I don't know, they don't have a true four-man on the roster, in my opinion. Like, Isaiah Stewart, we've seen it. He tried it. It's not it. He needs to be off the bench with 70% of his minutes at the five and 30% of his minutes at the four against certain matchups. I think Asar is like interesting as a four, but he's still not like a true four-man. And, Simone, I think, can do it. But again, like those, he's still more of like a three. So I think someone like Pat Williams would be interesting. He spaces the floor. So then maybe you can play Asar at the three in that lineup. Duren, if he's still your center, makes up for the rebounding or lack, you squeeze Patrick Williams between Asar and Jalen Duren. He doesn't need to rebound with those two guys on the floor. And then he provides floor spacing. So that makes sense. Maybe then Fontecchio, Stu, Sasser, Grimes kind of lead your second unit with a top five pick. That's interesting. It's not as talented. It's not as much as what I would want, but it's the start. Like, eventually there's going to be a trade. I think this becomes, is a trade at some point with a couple of, like, I don't think all four of those young guys, I wouldn't do it this offseason. I think like the deadline makes a lot more sense, but eventually, you're going to move one or two of those guys a pick to get the guy that really is a piece.
Final question here, Bryce. They have this draft pick here, projected at number 2, who knows what it is. Could be somebody like an Alex Sarr, right? Like somebody that, is a bigger potential 4-man, potential 5. Could be somebody like a Cody Williams, who's a big, 3-4 that we're talking about. Is there somebody that you like for that pick?
Yeah, I mean, I would take Risache if they have the ability to do so. If he's not on the board, then it becomes, do you take Cody Williams? Do you take Matas? I know there's been a lot of conversation, depending on where it falls, like even, potentially Reed Shepherd, right? Like, you just get a floor spacer on the floor. Like, this probably means the end of Jaden Ivey, they did it last year. They brought Jaden Ivey off, or this year they brought Jaden Ivey off the bench to start the year. Like, do you start doing something like that again and seeing if he becomes that type of guy? Like, I don't know. I'm also willing to entertain the conversation of Alex Sarr, and then, do you ask Duren to come off the bench? Do you trade Duren? Those type of things. I still don't like the idea of giving up on a 20-year-old. But a lot of these options are on the table. And so it will be, this is what's great about this draft, is it makes things really interesting regardless of where the pick lands.
Yeah, look, this is subject to change. We're doing this on March 20th. My little mini board right now for the Pistons would be something like Risache, probably Sarr, then like Modest and Cody Williams in there. And then probably like Reed and Steph Castle next, I think. That'd be kind of where my inkling and inclination is right now.
Yep. No, that's kind of where I'm at. We brought up Reed Shepard, Mr. Ray. I think we both talked about him.
Yeah. Okay.